Hey, if you're enjoying the content here at Dennis Sperling Unfiltered, make sure you support it by sharing, and subscribing to the channel. And also, hit that little notification bell in the corner so that you'll get notice of each and every one of our live feeds.
Talk to my gangbanger family. You make it very difficult for me. Go ahead, say that. In the 60s, we knew who the enemy was. But in 2007, you're the enemy. It's black people killing black people. Black people robbing black people. Black people raping black people. I'm talking to you. And I cannot call for retaliation in matters of the slain when you have become the #1 slayers of yourself and your own people. But this murder that is going on in our own community makes it difficult for me to make the right and necessary call for your justice. Listen. On any given Saturday night in cities across this nation, it's we killing each other. You make it easy for racist police to kill you because you are busy killing yourself. But if you stopped and became a community that respects the life of each other.
Thank you, everybody, for your contributions. I appreciate it. Let's keep it going. Donate to the Super Chat. Donate to the PayPal. Donate to the Cash App. It's your contributions and your donations that'll cause for this platform to grow. Let our voice be the preeminent voice in Black America.
Herzad Ali, okay? You say in your book,
okay, let's
and I'm quoting you,
Come on.
okay? The black man in America is the only male on earth, including every continent, who is disrespected by the women in his nation.
That's true.
This situation does not exist anyplace else among the billions of people inhabiting our planet except here in America.
That's right.
The other black men, the yellow men, the red men, the brown men, and the white men are all honored and respected by their respective nations. All other women recognize and accept that the man is the authority, the ruler, and the leader. Only here in the United States, in the black nation, scattered throughout the United States, is the black man neglected. That's pretty powerful.
And it's absolutely true. We have been displaced. A lot of us don't really understand what slavery actually did to us and how much psychological trauma it did to us regarding what our proper roles are.
I had the best 3 years of my life in prison.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's interesting for you to say that, bro, because you had millions.
I had peace, though.
Over the $30 million for one fight? Jay-Z's lying.
Hey, listen, can I tell you something? That don't mean nothing when you don't have your peace, your stability, your balance. You don't give a fuck. You don't even want it. You want to give it to somebody else. Yeah. You need your sanity to dictate any part of life. Because, you know, God, I always tell people, God punishes you by giving you everything you want. See if you can handle it.
As young people, it inspired many, especially young Black Americans, to speak the truth, first of all. And in addition to that, introduced us to the judicial system and how it works. Now, I'm going to tell you a little bit about him because many of us don't know who Judge Joe Brown is. His name is Joseph Blakely Brown Jr. He's born in 1947. We all know him and love him as Judge Joe Brown. He's an American lawyer, a television personality, and former Shelby County, Tennessee criminal court judge and former arbiter in the arbitration-based reality show Judge Joe Brown. Now, ironically, he was raised in the Crenshaw district of Los Angeles. Brown graduated valedictorian from Dorsey High School, and this is back in 1969. He earned his bachelor's degree in political science in 1973, and a Juris Doctor. In a Juris Doctor degree from UCLA. While attending law school, Brown worked as a substitute teacher, and like myself, is a member of Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated. Now, here's the thing: Brown became an American prosecutor in Memphis. He would later open his own law practice and become judge and state criminal court judge in Shelby County, Tennessee. How did he go from California to Tennessee? That's the question that I had. And that probably was culture shock. Brown was thrust into, this is before my time, but he was presiding over the James Earl Ray's last appeal in the assassination of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., a trial that they had. He was eventually deemed, they put him off the case, and that's probably some politics in there. Maybe we can ask him some questions about that. But the bottom line is, this is one of our trailblazers. This is one of our heroes. And above all, he is one of the elders that many of us grew up with, and one of the elders that will actually speak the truth to us. I don't know if Judge Brown knows this, but he has a deep following among people under the age of 50 years old. I mean, we literally love listening to Joe Brown. So without further ado, I'm proud to introduce Judge Joe Brown. Thank you so much, Judge. Let's get him in here. Good afternoon, Your Honor. How are you today?
I'm fine, young man. I went to law school with your father. You have some of the dates wrong.
Oh.
I didn't graduate in 1969 from Dorsey High. That was 4 years earlier, 1965. So I got out of UCLA as an undergrad in '69, and went right back later and got the law degree. How I got into Memphis is interesting. I was doing an intern thing at a Washington, D.C. think tank back in the early 70s between Chicago, D.C., and Delaware.
Okay.
And I met these brothers at Howard University who were running what they called a Reginald Herbert Smith Community Lawyer Fellowship. We called them Reggies. So jobs were kind of hard to come by in the legal profession then. I needed to do an apprenticeship and an internship so I could learn the trade. So they asked me if I wanted one. I said, yeah, sure. So I was supposed to be remaining in LA, but they had a last minute rule change because Nixon and his administration reached an agreement with our Hispanic brethren, and they were getting all of the Reggies in LA. And in order to get one, you had to agree to go someplace else for 6 months. That changed into a year and then 2 years. So they sent me to Nashville, Tennessee. It was kind of funny when I got there, they had some bouffant wearing type as the secretary, and she says, well, just sit down right there and we'll get to you just as soon as we can. We real busy. I don't know why we didn't call in with an appointment. I said, I'm not seeking legal services. Right. Well, what you here for then? Just wasting time? I said, no, I believe I'm supposed to be working here. Oh my God, Jesus. So she called in the deputy director, and he comes up, oh wow, hi, we're so happy to have you. Last colored fellow left for some reason, never could quite figure it out. Do you guys like being called black these days? I said, excuse me, sir, you happen to have a phone handed that I can call out on? Dial 9, be right back. Hello, American Airlines. Do you happen to have a flight back to Los Angeles this afternoon? Oh, not in 3 days, not you're overbooked for the next 3 days. Oh, I'm stranded.
Your Honor,
I got fired from that one because I convinced the director that I was serious in my indicated intent to throw him out of a 7th floor office window after he just said, I don't understand why anybody would want a black lawyer. They just incompetent or out to make a buck. You already got 2 strikes going on you when you walk in, and you black up in the courtroom. Why you want to get strike number 2 by having a black lawyer? Anyway.
Your
I
Honor,
reminded him years later when he became a judge and I was. You remember when I was gonna throw you out that window? He started laughing. Well, I've changed. I said, you better have. But anyway, I got sent to Memphis, and there was a progressive brother named A.C. Wharton who was the director, and I later became law partners with him some years down the pike. And I left there and went to work for the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. After that, I became the first black prosecutor in Memphis's, well, the history of the city of Memphis. And yeah, that's what it is. But after that, I became the chief public defender for the city. So I ran the public defender's office, and then I decided to go on into private practice, and that was in the late mid 70s, and been in ever since. And I specialized in criminal trial law, and I wound up after that, when I got into private practice, my new partner became the public defender, and he died in a mess where huge drug case. I think there were 42 criminal defendants, which included federal agents, local police. It was an interstate ring in the federal system, and every defendant and every lawyer died before it was over, except me and the two clients that I inherited from him. So the new partner was A.C. Wharton, and his wife, myself, and the late Ural Adams had been partners there in Memphis. So AC came in and took over Ural Adams' position, and he became the public defender. So I wound up doing this thing part-time, handling habitual criminals and major violators. I also later wound up volunteering to train the Capitol Defense Team for the Public Defender's Office. That was a big PD's office. They had about 120, 130 public defenders and staff. So what happens in Tennessee, if you were charged with a first-degree murder case and the state is demanding the death penalty, even if you can afford an attorney, you're entitled to a second-chair attorney being appointed to make sure all of the I's are dotted and T's are crossed. But you can't be second chair and appointed unless you've had experience being mentored as a second chair by somebody that was experienced. That was me. I think I had 42 capital murder cases where the death penalty was demanded that I tried as an attorney, and none of the clients are on death row. None of them went to death row.
yeah.
So we were successful. So I trained them, and we did what we did. And then people said, why don't you run for judge? And I did. And I got elected eventually to 2 8-year terms. Yeah. And then somewhere along the lines, because of what I was doing, I got discovered, and people said, you want to do TV? They had this Australian guy came out and says, Mike, would you like to do this television show? I said, I don't mind appearing. No, Mike, now to appear and have your own show. So it went. And by the way, what happened with the James Earl Ray case, I got assigned the case in random rotation. They thought that since I had sort of a militant background, I would just crush James Earl Ray, but I did my job to be fair and impartial. And I discovered something else was coming out of it. So what I did is I said, we've got an interesting situation here where they're claiming that using modern scientific methodology, they can establish the pristine innocence of James Earl Ray. So that was not allowed under the law. So I was going to let them have a proffer of proof, which was to test the rifle. Yes, well, we have a 2-tier appellate process in Tennessee. You have the Court of Appeals for civil matters, the Court of Appeals for criminal matters, and then you have the state Supreme Court. Yes, sir. Well, the appellate court sustained my being removed from the case, but then the Supreme Court put me back on the case. And the same week they put me back on, 2 days later, the state legislature had passed an act and the governor signed it that says if there is new scientific methodology, you may grant a petition for post-conviction relief, a hearing anyway, irrespective of whatever is going on. So what happens was they took an Alford versus North Carolina plea from James Earl Ray. He never admitted his guilt. And what the Alford plea is about is you may plead guilty even if you are not actually guilty, so long as in doing so, you are freely and voluntarily, understandingly, knowingly, advisedly, and intelligently waiving your right to trial, and the state has a reasonable factual basis upon which to otherwise proceed. So in this case, they were relying upon James Earl Ray's 760 Remington pump action rifle. It was a 30 caliber weapon. Well, when we wound up getting around to getting the ballistics test done, and then I got removed again and put back on the case before the test got done, it turned out that the bullet that was pulled out of Dr. King's body had a rate of rifling twist, or rather it was shot from a rifle that had a rate of rifling twist of 1 turn in every 11 1/4 inches. That means in 11 1/4 inches, the bullet turns over once as it goes down the barrel. Ray's rifle had a rate of rifling twist of 1 turn in every 10 inches. Now, the only way at that time in 1968 you could get a rifle with that rate of rifling twist is to have a custom gunsmith make you one up, or you had one of 62 rifles made by the U.S. Army Marksmanship. They were converting M14s to what they call the XM21. There was a company named Psionics that made them up. They're famous for those MAC-10 submachine guns that they featured in all the 70s and 80s action movies. Well, it turned out that the FBI had an invoice from late December 1967 where they got 5 of these weapons from the Defense Department, along with 5,000 rounds of special subsonic custom loaded ammunition, which had some very peculiar characteristics that matched what they pulled out of King's body exactly. The invoice contained the serial number, so that I know. And then after King got shot at the beginning of April, by this time, the Attorney General of the United States ordered the FBI to return all 5 weapons since the military wanted them for experimental purposes over in the Nam. Well, on inventory, the FBI claimed they lost one and didn't know what happened. That's the murder weapon. So they had maybe 3, 4 alternative scapegoats, and Ray was the best one for their purposes because guess what? He was not even in Memphis. And interestingly enough, the Homicide Bureau of the Memphis Police Department was adamant that Ray was not the shooter. Now, due to some novel characteristics of the rifle and the suppressor that they had on it, that's why people have a lot of confusion about where the shot was fired. They claim it was, some people indicated it was fired from the bushes, which are directly in line with a flophouse bathroom window that's right above it. Well, we got a affidavit from the first detective on the scene. He said it's impossible to come from the flophouse window because there was a tree growing in front of it between the Lorraine Motel and the flophouse window. And he said, interestingly enough, while we were doing the investigation, we heard some chainsaws going on, and we come back and they cut the tree down. We found out that there was an order to cut the tree down at 9 o'clock that morning, but guess what? The sanitation department was on strike. And that rifle, he said, we were walking in and out of the corridor for an hour and a half, no rifle. And he said, I walked down, all of a sudden there's this wrapped package right there at the doorway in the hallway. And guess what? Ray's rifle, some underwear, shaving kit, half a 6-pack of beer, and a radio with his prison identification riveted to it. So yeah, fine. We don't buy that. Now, who shot him? From the information I've gleaned over the years, it looks like the FBI at their Quantico training center recruited 2 Marine Corps snipers who had done some time in the NAM and were instructors at the Marine Corps sniping facility. There was a training facility. So they had the weapons, the ammunition. They did up the table map. They practiced. They got it in place. Nobody had to make a phone call. No mob, no nothing. J. Edgar Hoover knew about it. He ordered all electronic, auditory, and visual surveillance, camera surveillance of King to cease for 48 hours. King wasn't even supposed to be in the Lorraine Motel because it was a hoe house. It was on the hoe track. It was an hourly rate hotel. And they wanted King to continue to stay in what was known as the Rivermont Hotel, which was Holiday Inn's flagship hotel. So they insisted, after some people set up a big thing about him not being sensitive to the community and why is he staying there when he could stay in the hood. He didn't want to, but he did. It was a setup. They shot him from the fire station, not from the flop house, not from the bushes. It was about 35 yards across the way. It was a point blank shot. It was a two-man hit team. And instead of hitting him anywhere in the torso, which even if he'd been standing next to an emergency room and it was a full-on 30 caliber round soft point expanding bullet, that's a non-survivable wound. But because the unique characteristics of their setup consisted of firing subsonic ammunition, it changed the picture. You get a 30 caliber 162 grain bullet moving at 25 to 2,700 feet per second. You got 1.25 tons of energy that's dumped into the target at that range. This person you hit is dead. But when you slow it down to 1,100 feet per second, you've got a pretty weak pistol bullet. So they tried to take a headshot. They hit him in the, well, I guess since it's reversed, I'll point with the left hand. They hit him in the right cheek. That doesn't look right. They hit him in the right cheek, and it went through, ripped out molars, tore out a flap of skin. It came out, hit his clavicle, and it deflected and ripped up his carotid artery complex on the right of his neck. He's dead, man. So that stuff about somebody smothered him in the hospital is nonsense. That's this urban myth. And it traveled down over his shoulder like bullets sometimes do. That's what killed him. So he didn't make it off the balcony. He had been bled out in about 30 seconds because a lot of that was internal.
Yes, Your Honor.
There wasn't as much blood as you might have expected. So with that, and some sentencing stuff I did to try and turn things around, acting as a village chieftain rather than as a judge locking everybody up. I used the coercive power of my position to forcibly implement some man-up style training to some of the people that I came through. And one of the other reasons they came to me was because I'd had all this news coverage over what I was doing. The statewide recidivism rate for Tennessee was about 80%, but in my courtroom over a 10-year period, it was only 18%. So everybody wanted to know what I was doing to do that.
Yeah.
And was what I did. So I wound up getting this show. I had it for 15 years. I was novel in that the California Supreme Court specifically declared me in a written opinion to be a qualified arbitrator under the California laws. That's the judicial arbitration and mediation laws. What I did was official. It was enforceable. And I could find people in contempt and have them locked up for disrupting a judicial mediation or arbitration proceeding. Now, when we finished up, the last 5 years I had this show, there was a guy named Roger King of King World who had discovered Oprah and Phil that came in and wound up getting Judge Judy and Judge Joe Brown added to a special select unit that CBS syndication is set up, and he was going to manage it. Well, he came to me and said they were trying to rank me out. He didn't like it. So he was going to help. So for the last 4 years, I beat Oprah in the ratings every week, Phil every week. He wasn't even close. And half the time I was stepping on Judy's heels. And at one point, Wikipedia was saying I was the highest paid male talent in all of Hollywood. The only person getting paid more than me was Leslie Moonves of CBS. He was the CEO. Mm-hmm. And the highest paid person was Judge Judy. So we were battling back and forth in the ratings, but because I was a straight black man, they didn't want to hear that. So you never would find it out unless you checked with Nielsen. It was so bad that even in the second largest TV market in America, LA, they wouldn't put me in the TV guide. And the biggest call we got is, "We love you, Judge. Where can we find you?" But in spite of that, I was the number one and number two television show in syndication. Now, they put it out at the end when I just said, "I quit. I'm not taking an IOU from CBS for all of the money that you owe me." They said the ratings had dropped. Well, it dropped with everybody because that's when this new media thing started kicking in. But I was still relatively number one and number two. So what the devil difference does it make? Plus, here's something you should do, and anybody out there who works for a large company, buy a couple of shares of stock and see what they say with the stockholders or shareholders report. They were saying that I was CBS's number one profit-making entity in terms of overhead versus income. And they said for 14 consecutive quarters, as a result of my show, CBS was making the most profit they'd ever made in history, especially the last 4 quarters. So I knew what everybody who was talking to me was getting paid. I confronted them with it, and also some insider trading that I discovered. And we were just at loggerheads. I said, "Look, I'm 65 years old. Screw all this stuff. I'm retired. You know, I've had enough. Put it away. Would be very well off if I hadn't gone through a divorce. And, you know, it was way deep into that. It's cheaper to keep her. So I ain't bad off now, but I ain't got the doubles I had. I don't know what she's done with them. She's a beautiful and talented woman, but she got remarried, so more power to her. I don't have to pay support payments anymore. So that's good. But, you know, that's what it is.
Well, my God.
That's how I got where I am.
Thank you so much, Judge. But we have a lot of young people that follow you. And so I personally know what Los Angeles was like. Well, let me say, I don't personally know because I wasn't born in '74, but I have relatives who lived in Los Angeles in the 1960s. And in 1964, when you graduated from Dorsey High School, that was not the safest place in the world.
No. All this stuff everybody's worked up about police killings.
Yeah.
LAPD killed that many. All of them you've heard about over the last 4 or 5 years, they killed that many in every 1 or 2 week period.
Yeah.
So, it was brutal.
And you were the valedictorian. You were the valedictorian of Dorsey High School. Now, I graduated from Manual Arts High School, which is up the street on King Boulevard.
I know where it is.
And you graduated from Dorsey. I was supposed to be
going there, but I wound up transferring to Dorsey.
How did you survive the distractions of LA in the 1960s with everything that was going on? And if you can describe
it was hard.
Yes, sir.
It was hard. And still to this day, I cuss. My father taught me what was our martial arts then, which was boxing. So I was pretty good at it. I knocked a few people down and 1 or 2 out. And then I had a good friend. We became best buddies in 1965, 66. He's the late Dr. Clifford Stewart. This guy wound up being a professor, had a PhD, everything you can think of, and so many black belts you can't even count. And Black Belt Magazine for years called him the most dangerous human alive in North America. Now, my old man taught me to shoot when I was 6 or 7, so I taught Cliff how to shoot. He started teaching me martial arts 55 years ago. So he wound up, by the way. Now, that was the smart one. He graduated summa cum laude from UCLA, and at the same time graduated from Cal State, LA, magna cum laude. At UCLA was television and motion picture production, and at Cal State it was on geology and petroleum production. So he wound up being Muhammad Ali's bodyguard, Mr. T's bodyguard, Larry Flint of Hustler Magazine's bodyguard after he got shot. He did assignments for Mossad, French intelligence, British MI6, that's James Bond's folk, used to come over and consult with him. The CIA was always coming into the green room to talk with him. He was bodyguard for the chief of Saudi counterintelligence. You know, this is the kind of thing he did and the way we would roll. So we had some adventurous times going way back when.
Yes, sure.
And I know some observations that I never forgot. We ran a playground. I worked for Cliff. There was a Dr. Ron Chappelle who was there. He's another martial artist. And we were at Trinity Avenue Elementary School, and we had two interesting young 12-year-olds who were skinny at the time. One of them is the late singer Barry White.
Oh, okay.
And the other one is the late Tookie Williams, who started the Crips and was the last person executed on California's death row.
I remember
Well,
that.
both of them were outstanding young men with talent and leadership. Barry White's mother was cooperative in seeing that he got out of the swamp, but Tookie's mother wasn't too anxious. I guess it was a check. So he couldn't get out of the swamp. He just became the baddest alligator in the swamp. And he wound up writing 6 children's books, which were something that we saw in him. But unfortunately, the California's governor at the time was very, well, he should have commuted his sentence to life because he had a lot to offer. And at this playground, we had a bad hood. It was probably the worst in LA at the time. But we had all this intense cooperation with the community. The 3 of us young men, we would take 200 kids from kindergarten all the way through the 7th grade to the movies every Wednesday evening downtown LA. We got UCLA to provide the transportation. And patrons and managers of theaters said, keep them coming. We did not even realize there was a single child in there. How do you young men keep them so quiet? Just said, we are men. So children respond to that, which is something that stuck with me when I hear some of the proposed ideas about getting peace in the community.
Sir,
We had, yes, go ahead.
I don't want to interrupt you because everybody loves to hear, but you mentioned you dropped so many jewels here. Now, you mentioned earlier about your growing up in the Crenshaw district over there.
No, it wasn't Crenshaw district.
Well,
Where I grew up was 58th Place in Normandy, which is right near Slauson.
That's where I grew up. I lived off 58th Place, 1104 West 58th Place, right there between Kansas and Budlong Elementary School.
I know exactly where it is. I went to Avenue Elementary School, the John Muir Junior High.
That's where I went to junior high. Wow. I went to Budlong Elementary, and then I went to John Muir Junior High, and then went down the street to Manual. So you were actually right down the street on Normandy, and I was on the Kansas side of
yeah. I know where you live. I know the 1100 block. Remember when the Sears Roebuck was down there on Vermont and Slauson?
Yes, Your Honor. I do.
Yeah, all of that.
Wow. Yeah, so you're from you grew up right down the street where I grew up in South Central LA. That is amazing. Your Honor, and again, thank you for being here. I want to ask you some questions about fatherhood and the importance that Black fathers play in the Black community, because it seems to me that the role of the Black father has been downplayed. And I think, and the vast majority of my followers are Black men, and we feel that the Black father's role is crucial, but it's almost like it's been seen it's been diminished. What are your thoughts on that?
Okay, at UCLA in the 60s, I heard the beginnings of this mess.
Mm-hmm.
You had the feminists who hated that they were not men, the lesbians who hated men. You had the gay folk that did not like overt masculinity. Not all of them, but some of them. You had the beta boys or soy boys who were white but couldn't make it in a man's world, and they were trying to do something to get free from the grip of the requirements of masculinity, which are very strict. You had a ballast that got added to this engine when you had the anti-war group deciding that war was a man thing. So the way to stop war was to change the way boys were raised to men. And if you raised them like girls, they would emote, cry, shout, let it all hang out, etc., instead of getting uptight and letting it build up and having war and all of this. So no cap pistols, no water guns, no war toys, unisex child rearing, unisex child clothes, the whole 9 yards. And that became quite popular. Now, the cause for that, which was the draft, went away. So that part left. But by then, see, Hollywood had lost its edge in terms of movies. In the 60s, mid 60s, if you went to a movie, you walk in any time, and if you were adult, it was 50 cents max, and you got 2 features, 2 or 3 cartoons, and a sub feature. And the movies changed every Thursday and Sunday. So studios had to make hundreds of them a year, and they had the same cast of stars that played various parts in every movie they made. Well, color television was driving them bankrupt. So they got rid of some of the old heads and some of this crowd that was pledging to change masculinity in manhood because they thought masculinity was toxic. They took control of the Hollywood industry and they came up with a scam, which was, look, all of these black people at the bottom who want to see something about themselves, let's appeal to their lowest common denominator. So instead of ideating on black men getting ahead, having good jobs, going to college, doing all of this, which was practical because it kept you from getting a 1A and an all expense paid vacation to sunny Nam. Well, they started glorifying pimps, hoes, drug dealers, gangsters, murderers, thieves, the whole 9 yards of dysfunction, and they've been on that ever since. I saw this, like, for example, when I was the public defender, my white subordinates had a real problem. Some of them were going into the black neighborhoods and interviewing black defendants and black witnesses, and a lot of our people, job or otherwise, just couldn't seem to get downtown to talk to their lawyers. So we'd have to go out there. So I'd get in these homes and I'd walk in and it'd be smoke filled and there'd be 5 or 6 young women, and I mean young women. The client that you had might be 19 years old and she's got her 14-year-old sister girl and 18-year-old home girl, and they've got 15 or 20 little badly trained children with snot dried all over their faces, food caked all over their clothes. They smell, they haven't had a bath, and they're coming, come here, little Ian, bring me my cigarettes, you little fool, blah, blah, blah. So why are you talking to your little 4-year-old son like that? He ain't nothing but a no good, low down dog Ian, just like his no good Ian dog daddy. So this is like 1977 or 6. And you get 10 years later, and this guy who was 6 years old is now 16. It's 1986, or he's 19, or he's 12. And then in 1996, he's in his late 20s. And then in the first decade, he's in his 30s. And now he's in his 40s. And everybody in the family is starting off because they want a check back in 1970. So you're in there and you think this is somebody's baby sister, which may be the case, but she's the mother of 2 of those children. How old are you? I'm 13. How many of these are yours? 2. So you got 2 children and you're 13 years old. And see, that lack of masculinity, that lack of masculine input gave a flavor to this whole thing of, I stay at home, I don't want to work, I don't want to go to school, I flat back gap, get knocked up, get a bigger check. That was the incentive. The more babies you had, the bigger your check. You gave them to your mama, big mama, Madea, and you get to pocket most of the money and give your mama a little bit of pocket change to keep them. And her hustle is she's got 7, 8, 9, 10, 12, 14 babies in a 2-bedroom apartment where she's getting part of the check. And the check, see, fits into another thing that the criminal justice system started doing, which is converting from a crime control device to a surplus labor control device. See, labor is a commodity like wheat, corn, or cotton. And when you have a glut, you do 3 things. You cut back production, store the surplus, and subsidize the would-be producer for not producing the product or the commodity. We put the surplus not in a grain silo, but in a warehouse known as a jail or penitentiary. The subsidy is the public assistance check. The cutting back of production is the glorification of dysfunction that causes the kids to drop out, bang out, to get knocked up too early, too often, to not to have academic skills or vocational skills, to have wrong worldviews, wrong ideation, so that they clown, carry on. They make their communities chaotic, so the communities that are impacted cannot engage in cohesive political activity. And when they get that first felony, they go to the storage facility. There's no rehabilitation intended, because if you rehab them, they just get back out there and glut the job market. And you don't want that job market glutted, because you have Timothy McVeigh types that'll buy up ammonium nitrate fertilizer, 250 pounds, don't have to do anything except sensitize it, and you can blow up a courthouse in Oklahoma City. They don't want that, so get the people out of the way. Meanwhile, it's not free labor in the penitentiaries. It's keep them from working at all. And while we whoopee, there's a $1 trillion growth industry on feeding them, clothing them, sheltering them, supervising them, providing communications. And this thing has become privatized, particularly with the juvenile courts, which are following a trend that shows privatization and conversion into profit-making entities, so that there is no incentive to rehabilitate or rehab the juveniles who are coming through. You want them to stay delinquent, so they will continue to clown and carrying on, and you generate business in perpetuity. So that's not good.
That's
and that cuts down the fatherhood thing, see, because in the 70s, when I was with legal services, one of the main cases we had was getting the woman's check cut back on, because some social worker had the binoculars, and if they saw me going in there, they cut the check off. And that got them to saying, you ain't coming by here doing this. So that cut fatherhood out of the way. You know, that alienated the dads. They didn't have DNA testing then, so all the woman had to do was go down and say, he's the daddy. I'm not the daddy. You know, I know who the daddy is. He's a white man. Don't you say anything, nigger, up in here about blah, 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 blah. So what happens is you got these fathers alienated. This stuff about the best thing is to keep fathers away from children. And it's not your fault if you are a screw up. It's some man's fault. And you have to take control of your destiny. So what we have right now is we have people that want to be fathers, but because of circumstances, either an ignorant ex, a bitter ex, or some misguided somebody acting through the court system itself, the father is kept from being a functional father. My suggestion on that is, if you can't be the father for the ones you naturally love and feel obligated to, be a father for all of them, and maybe some of it will percolate over into where your child is or your children are. And that's good for the girls and the boys, because if the girl doesn't have a father around, she might listen to the bitterness that some people are putting in her head and not like herself or men. And instead of saying, Daddy, could I have $50, Daddy? Because Tamika and I want to go to the mall. Baby, I just gave you 20 the other day. Come on, Daddy. Oh, well, here's 100. Don't bother me anymore. But she learns how to deal with men, and she doesn't put that hand on hip. Let me tell you what I'm going to make you do. you know,
Right.
which goes nowhere. And then you get this insane battle going on in the home front where I can do it better than you. And you get this insane thing, particularly in black households, even when there is mom and dad handy, where instead of a cooperative effort, you've got somebody trying to prove they can do something better than their significant other, which is poison. And then see, the children don't see man and woman relating to each other. So this LGBT thing resonates, which is you can deal with the same sex. So the boys don't know how to deal with the girls don't know how to deal with the boys, but girls and boys, you know, hung out with their same sex. Little girls hung out with little girls, little boys hung out with little boys. And now the LGBT things is all right to have sex with them so you can get your orgasm on. And what happens is nobody knows how to deal with each other. And I'm a bachelor again. I mean, I'm getting older, not as good as I used to be, but sometimes I'm better than I ever was. But, you know, that dating game is hard because it's so bad that this propaganda effort that they started in on 55 years ago has become so effective in creating a false narrative about how things work, where ideation gets all crazed and thrown out the window. So we don't have any happy homes and we've got a problem. I'll ask you this first. You know about Take Your Daughter to Work Week. First one they had was in 1970.
Okay.
Have you ever heard of Take Your Son to Work Week?
No.
Okay.
Never heard
Now,
that.
here's where we are. The Defense Department released these statistics 10 years ago, 2011. This was for the first decade of the 21st century, and they haven't changed. On average, with all ethnicities combined, only 28% of each year's high school graduates across the nation are male. Only 32% of the college undergraduates are male. Only 36% of the college grad students are male. And only 44% of the American workforce is male. And for those 35 and under, that thing that you hear about women not getting paid equal pay for the same work, it's reversed. A lot of the high-tech companies and other associated facilities that rely on technology and computerization, they've had to pay out a lot in damages because it's developed that the young men are paid less for the same job than the young women who hold comparable positions. You get in and you go to a college or university, and it's gotten worse in the 15 years, 10 years since I was on that lecture circuit. You go in and like, where are all the boys? Well, Judge, it's just about all of them in school. This is all you have here? And you find that there are very few males, particularly black males, because all ethnicities combined, you only have 32% of the undergrads are male. And then you got this other thing too, that nationwide, the whole pot is showing that for those 35 and under, 42% of the American population, 35 and under, is born out of wedlock. And if you take the 20% and under, you got to figure it's ramped up to 78 to 82%, which is horrible. You know, so somebody thinks that we should not have a family. And BLM, well, a lot of black folk got on them once they started reading the whole what we believe thing, and it starts off after they go through the frou-frou. We are for the destruction of the traditional nuclear family. We are for the end of cisgender privilege in the family, which means the position of straight men and women in the family. We are a queer affirming network, which is all right for those people who swing that way. They have a right to push their positions. Absolutely. But you see, this is what is bad. It has become so focused on sexuality that it has gotten out of hand, because what is it doing to these young children? You recall when you were a child in elementary school, I'm sure there were songs that you learned or got taught, they're still with you. But can you imagine what they're being taught now? And then this sexualization that you get, it has gotten way out of hand. because why should a sixth grader be taught about sex when you can't teach him about heterosexuality, but you can teach him homosexuality? Why is it that you're focused on sexual imagery so that if you didn't tell anybody what you were about, who would know? Like,
Well,
in the normal world, we have this thing called decency.
right.
You don't show certain things during daytime when children are about. There's certain places like nightclubs where you have to be 21 years of age or over to get in. You reserve it for after 10 o'clock in the evening. But you see, they can put this stuff down with the kindergartners. So it's their right, but it just doesn't work. And when I conclude this last point,
Yes, sir.
is we have a situation now where we've got 3 functional national parties. 2 of them are official, one's not. We've got Dumbo, Jackass, and Rainbow. Dumbo is the Republicans, Jackass is that donkey thing, the Democrats, and Rainbow is LGBTQ. But just like all blacks aren't Democrats and all conservative whites are not Republicans, all gays are not LGBTQ. But it is an interesting thing because, like you mentioned, I'm an alpha.
Right.
Got made in 1966, but I'm also Masonic. So I might run into somebody who is Masonic brother who's also a Q or a Kappa. So what happens is you have Dumbos who are rainbows and you have jackasses who are rainbows. And what happens is while the jackass part and the Dumbo part are creating confusion, the rainbow part is collaborating on sneaking something around and behind. So that's politics. So just like they can attack Trump, they can attack Nancy Pelosi or Joe Biden or Kamala Harris. They are open to attack themselves. So with that, yeah, that was a spiel just setting the landscape in which.
Well, you kind of are helping me segue into my next conversation. I don't know if you're aware of this, but you had apparently, what is it called? hiphop.com or worldstar.com. One of these channels or whatever took a clip from yours from, well, what is it called? It's called worldstar.com. Recently you did an interview with Kwame Brown, and they basically talked about your criticisms of Joe Biden. Now, here's the thing.
He's a low-down scoundrel.
Okay, hold on a minute. So your criticisms reflect some of the feelings that a lot of Black Americans have. I normally vote Democratic straight ticket. I could not stomach voting for Joe Biden in this particular election. And the reason being is because I remember the climate that he helped create in the 1994, with the 1994 crime bill, Hillary Clinton. I remember the 1988 crack bill, and I still have relatives and friends who are suffering because of those bills that he was behind. Now, I get it.
You're letting him off the hook. The 94 crime bill was the least of the bad. Don't forget the 91, the 87, the 81, the 79, and the 77. That 81 is the one that said one rock gets you 5 years in a federal penitentiary. And don't forget, one of the adjuncts to that was they ended federal probation and parole for adults. And what happens is that if you get a 5-year sentence, that's 60 months, and you wind up being in federal custody under their control for 56 to 58 of those 60 months.
Judge, and here's the thing. I understand that at that time, there was a lot of crack in the Black neighborhood. Crack being a cheap form of cocaine that just popped up in like the previous 10 years. And they used those bills to target Black Americans. How did these bills that were handcrafted by Joe Biden affect the Black community? It's my opinion that he single-handedly, with his work, was instrumental in destroying the Black community with these over-enforcement.
He was. Now,
what are your thoughts?
Let's drop back. I remember intern DC think tank, 1972, I'm in Dover, Delaware. I'm in their rundown state capitol, and I hear this commotion outside. I go outside. They got a stage set up. They've got James O. Eastland, Byrd, former Grand Dragon of the Klan, Grand Wizard. They've got Stennis. They've got Faubus. They've got Eastland, and they're bragging about this new yellow dog Dixiecrat, this silly-looking fool with a ducktail hairdo who got introduced as Joe Biden. And he was pontificating on how the great state of Delaware was ideally situated to deal with this Negro problem. And he said Delaware was a proud slaveholding state, but it was coerced by its nearness to Washington, D.C. to remain with the Union instead of doing what it should have done and going with the South. So I heard him. I saw him get up there and say he knew the Negro. He's always been saying that. He said, Negro children are like roaches. And if we let them integrate our schools, we'll never be able to get them out and eradicate them. Negro men are like animals, and they turn the streets into jungles. And if James O. Eastland can be joined by me in the U.S. Senate, we will pass laws to put these animals in zoos so they will not be able to turn our streets into jungles. 1977, that's just exactly what they were attempting to do, is put all of these animals in the zoos, meaning us. The other thing is glorification of dysfunction by Hollywood hit its nadir that same year, 71, 72, when they came out with Superfly, which was glorifying cocaine.
Yes,
now, I've talked to some DEA agents who are now retired who can talk to me. And they say, okay, Judge, we think you're kind of right because it just doesn't make sense. See, crack is refined powdered cocaine, and they used to freebase it. Now, you spend a whole lot of money getting powdered cocaine, and what you do is when you freebase it, you purify it. So how in the world does purified cocaine cost less than the raw product? That's like finding a 55-gallon drum of 91 or 93 octane gas that is cheaper than 55 gallons of crude. It doesn't make sense. There's a subsidy somewhere in this pipeline. J. Edgar Hoover, from stuff we have found out about him over the intervening 50 years, was actively attempting to subvert the interest of the Black community and destroy them because of two things. One, he had this crazy idea that somehow or another the communists had infiltrated the Black community and were turning the good Negroes into enemies of the Republic. Next thing, you can see this on the History Channel, the Smithsonian Channel. For the last 2 years, they've been running specials on the FBI, and lo and behold, guess what? J. Edgar Hoover really was. He was a Black man, and he was deeply ashamed of that, and his parents got run out of Louisiana for trying to pass for white, and crosses got burned in their yard. So he had a hatred for the Klan, but he had a hatred for what he was, like so many Black folk who haven't gotten the colored out, and they are ashamed of being Black. Now, the whole FBI that the Black Caucus wants to be so friendly with now was set up to get Black Jack Johnson, first Black world heavyweight champion. He had a thing for white women. He married one. So they were trying to get information that would set up what is now known as the Mann Act, transporting women across state lines for lewd and lascivious purposes. So what they did is they created the FBI, and what they did wound up resulting in the Mann Act. And in fact, they're responsible for arresting Jack Johnson, who was on a train with his lawful wife, who happened to be white.
Okay.
And they traveled across the corner of Georgia for 15 minutes, going to a seaport. And when they left Georgia, they got arrested as they got off of the train because Georgia didn't recognize interracial marriage. So he got tried, convicted, he escaped, went to France, And when his mother got sick, she begged him to come back. He tried to sneak back in the country. He got caught and wound up having to do his federal time for what is now not a crime.
Mm-hmm.
So he wound up dying in a car wreck in 1946. And I know my parents used to idolize Jack Johnson because to them, he was like Muhammad Ali was to my generation and your dad's generation. He stood up and thumbed his nose at the white folk and couldn't anybody whip him. So we were very disturbed that our next to last president, Barack Obama, would not pardon Jack Johnson after the U.S. Senate and the U.S. House passed a resolution to do so. But interestingly enough, person that everybody loves to hate, Donald Trump did. But see, Jack Johnson was hero for a lot of people. By the way, history. They decided in the spirit of enlightenment to take that offensive picture of Aunt Jemima off of the pancake box.
Right.
Well, guess why black folk used to love Aunt Jemima pancakes? The picture on the box represents a real live person that black people on my parents' generation were proud of because she was one of the first black millionairesses in the United States. She actually invented the pancakes that were named after her. And when General Foods or whoever it is that got it, they kept her picture on the box. And ever since then, for the last 100 years, the family has been getting royalties for their maternal ancestors' picture being a life picture on the box. So now they don't get the stuff because the enlightened people took the picture off and they didn't even realize what they were doing.
Wow. You guys, if you appreciate Joe Brown, hit hashtag Joe Brown and the hashtag Judge Joe Brown in the comment section. We want to show our appreciation. YouTube has demonetized this, and so we're going to go ahead and give them the rest of it. We're going to give them that smoke.
Speaking of which, YouTube demonetizing, that has been occurring across the board. It's censorship. I told a lot of people a year ago, I said, if this bunch gets in the White House, this regime, you're going to see censorship being ramped up. They're going to be fearing their Cheerios.
Right.
This is the first time in my life I've ever seen the First Amendment get turned around like it is. They used to have censorship for wartime stuff, which I understand. They used to have censorship about the way you said something. In other words, you weren't supposed to use obscenity, but you could freely express ideas. Now they've got it set up so you can be criminally prosecuted for things that you say that would not even be subject to a defamation action.
Now, Judge, I want to ask you a question as far as young people moving forward, because we very rarely have elders that will actually speak the truth to us, and you're one of them. And I think that's why there's so many people under the age of 50 who just adore you, and that's why my comment section is flooded. And what advice do you have for young people? And here's the thing: why is it that so many of our elders, older blacks, are beholden to the Democratic Party, and they want us to just follow that line when you yourself has put forth the argument and explain some of these policies are not good for black people, with the welfare and then also the alphabet community. That is not necessarily good for black families, but they want us to continue voting for that, which is pushed by so many of the Democratic. But the floor is yours.
Habit and propaganda. The Republican Party has done their part to earn this label of being oppressive, yes, but they can change. The problem is that the Democratic Party has become the de facto captive of some people who are bound to destroy the family, manhood, womanhood, and childhood. And if those things are destroyed, that screws up everybody. And incidentally, it's an opportunity because for the first time in American history, white, black, brown, red, yellow now have common cause and, shall we say, a common foe who is against what they stand for.
Mhm.
So that might work out to an alliance, like you saw Stalin representing communism, Churchill representing a monarchy, FDR representing a democratic republic, allying to get rid of Adolf Hitler and the Japanese Empire in World War II. It worked. But we have an opportunity to do something like that. But right now, may I suggest this? Examine what you think you believe and see if it is logical, rational, and reasonable. From my perspective, and probably from your dad's, when we saw it start, and now that we look at what's going on right now, we can see how it got that way. And one of the tenets of propaganda is to get the target to think in terms of the propaganda goal, like toxic masculinity does not exist. Homophobia is a new word. See, so you get, I'm not homophobic. Well, homophobia is a new creation. All right. What is your pronoun? By the way, a homework assignment on that to illustrate the point, the absurdity of it all is open up any book, textbook, book that's serious, and take isolated paragraphs and try to turn them into appropriate modern choice of pronouns and see if it makes any sense. 9-year-old kid said, I'm a they. I said, okay, so you're a royal, they, plural? Yes. I said, well, you know, I know the English language. I can write it quite well. So what do you want me to say if somebody asks me, are you coming to dinner? I'd say, they is coming to dinner. That's bad English.
Right.
By the way, little kid, I don't even remember what your name is. So how am I going to remember what your pronoun is? I got a lot more relevant stuff to think about than corrupting the lingua franca of the planet, which everybody communicates in. So tattoo your pronoun up there and I will still ignore it because I'll use good English. Toxic masculinity. That's from the 60s when they started talking about all masculinity is toxic. And on UCLA's campus down in Meyerhoff Park at the foot of the stairs, I heard speech after speech saying we have to start little at a time and get all of these elements of masculinity declared toxic. What's masculinity? It's an inputted set of protocols that are put into a boy's head from day one, such that when he becomes grown, he can't get beyond those principles and he has to follow them. What are the principles? Duty, honor, obligation, responsibility, accountability, making where you are a better, safer, more secure place filled with economic prosperity, sense of purpose, morality, and ethics. Being men of peace and public dignity who can be brave, courageous, and very violent when necessary and appropriate, but otherwise controlling yourself. Being taught the difficult concept so that it becomes something you'll actually follow when it is appropriate. The water is freezing, the Titanic is going down, and you're ensuring that the women and children get in the lifeboat first. That's rough, but you see, that takes a lot of work, so they've gotten away from that. So we think in terms of toxic masculinity when what they call toxic masculinity is an absence thereof. We think of homophobia, which is a 10-year-old word. The word that is the old one is heterophobia. You put that in an iPhone and then the underline is red, and you have to go on the net to look it up to find out what it means. But if you put homophobia, not only is it approved, a rainbow emoji will pop up. But heterophobia, homosexuals had a very real fear of straight people torturing them, mutilating them, hanging them, putting them in jails, firing them, ostracizing them. That is subject to an unreasonable fear and response. Most straight folks don't have an unreasoning fear of homosexuals. They just find them distasteful when they flash it. In other words, let's take Black Pride thing versus gay pride.
Right.
1960s, when your father and I were coming through college, we got black pride because we were ashamed of not being mentioned in anything, and we were pretty much down on ourselves. So we said, let's engage in self-help. I'm black and I'm proud. Ungawa, black power. You know,
Right.
I'm black and I'm proud. Now you've
Yeah.
got people who push the envelope who are deeply ashamed of themselves. They hate themselves. They hate what they want to be, and they hate what they are. So you get this self-hatred. So let's say we had a black pride parade, and then we have a gay pride parade. Gay pride first. You get them on floats with chaps, and their buttocks and penises are out, and they are put dog collars and chains on their necks and everything, and they're giving a burlesque, and it's all sexual. That's supposed to be pride. Well, let's look at the counterpart. Let's say on a black pride parade, you had blacks dressing up as slaves in minstrels, and some of them in costumes where they were monkeys with a chain around their neck and an organ grinder with the chain attached to the grind organ, and they're jumping around and capering like monkeys. That certainly wouldn't be black pride. What is it? It's self-hate. Right. And you can call it black pride all you want, but that would not be a proper manifestation. Just like what you see is a subconscious manifestation of self-hate. Now, let's get on to that. This thing about fluid gender. Well, opinions are opinions, and there's some support for fluid gender, but the mass of the scientific literature says that's not so. It is, in fact, a pathology. But 50 years ago, as part of trying to normalize such things, they engaged on a concerted effort to destroy the supreme reputation that medicine and science had in the 1960s and destroy it and bring it down. Why? Because if they didn't, then they couldn't get away with this minority so-called faux science of saying fluid gender is a reality. You know, how would you, if you are studying, let's say somebody died and they died in the hospital of natural causes. How would the medical examiner describe what's in front of him, male or female? Well, obviously, unless somebody's got a connection to someplace else, you can't revive him and say, what did you consider yourself?
Right.
That, see, is one of the flaws and fallacies, but it's acceptable if you've destroyed the reputation of science and medicine. And where else does that impact? Well, the reaction to COVID-19 has to be set in an environment whereas the respect that medicine and technology and science had 50 years ago no longer is there. So people have all kinds of crazy, sometimes perhaps correct or incorrect ideas about what COVID-19, SARS-CoV-2 is all about, and don't understand mutations because they don't teach science in school anymore. Now, that is one of the fallouts, and that's one of the problems we have where we buy into somebody's wish list. And plus, I'm angry with the Democratic Party. Now, the first time I paid attention to politics was back in the 50s when our school teacher always required that we read the newspaper and stay up on politics. And she would question us about Eisenhower, Gary Powers getting shot down in the U-2. And I remember as an assignment for social studies in junior high school, I had to watch the Kennedy-Nixon debate. I've kept up with it since. But I'm looking at this thing right now where the Democratic Party has essentially used black people just to secure a reasonable entry into the political arena of being in control and supposedly representing things. So their constituents aren't represented. We've got a guy named Steve Cohen, who is the 9th District Congressman here in Memphis.
Okay.
Harold Ford Sr. got elected, the first black elected to that position in 1974. In the 1990s, his son Harold Ford Jr. took it over. He retired to run for U.S. Senator. He didn't win, but we had 14 black folk running for that position in the Democratic Party primary. We had one white Jewish guy who's gay, Steve Cohen, and he ran for that office. He got the Democratic Party nomination, and in the 9th district, that's a guarantee that you'll win. Now, his district is 91% black. His net output of legislation over, I think it's either 6 or 7 terms, was a binding resolution on Congress to use paper straws in the congressional cafeteria. Now, it turns out he's head of the committee that drafted the Asian Protection Bill. And good for the Asians, they're fine people. But in all these terms, he's introduced absolutely nothing that would help out the 91% black majority of his congressional district. Not one thing. Yeah. So what do we get out of the deal? So it's time to play astute politics. And every other ethnic group in this country has made a habit of changing allegiances just to change, so the party in power, if they aren't offering what that constituency wants, will understand when their water runs dry, they'll miss their water. When the well runs dry, they'll miss their water. They need to do something to keep these constituencies active supporters. We get nothing. We're just in this habit of plantation mentality. That's our team, so we have to vote that way.
So are you saying, so is Judge Brown saying that some black people or all black people or enough black people should begin to vote for the mean old nasty Republican Party?
Well, here's what I'm saying. Here's how it works. Every now and then, if you aren't getting anything, even if you have to hold your nose, vote for the opposition, because it can't get any worse than it is now. Yeah. So vote for the opposition, so the people that have been counting on you go, oh, wait a minute, we got to do something to bring them back. And
I share your opinion.
Says, wow, look what we got. We need to give them something to bring more of them over. And what you need to do is become independent.
Right.
And vote issues and candidates, not parties.
You know, Judge, I share your opinion that Joe Biden is a racist, and it's because of his history of voting. Now, a lot of people say, well, Trump's a racist. I said, well, yeah, he might be, but Joe Biden ain't no better. So I'm going to vote for the person who has my interest in heart, and not because, and I'm not just totally aligned with one party or another. I think, is that what you're saying?
That's exactly what I'm saying. Vote independent and cast your ballot for the person that gives you an indication that the policies that will be implemented will be in your best interest. Please look at their track records. Like Biden, he didn't promise us much, but he's delivered nothing, and his track record shows that everything that you get from him is a hard time.
Yeah. Your Honor, I know we're coming up over almost on 2 hours, and I don't want to hold you all day, but I want you to give your advice to young people. There's a lot going on, and specifically young black people. There's a lot going on in the black community. I don't know if you know, but it appears over the past 10 or 15 years, there's been a gender war between black men and black women. You know, we really don't see eye to eye on certain things, i.e. fatherhood, marriage, raising children. It just looks like it's going to hell in a handbasket. And
it is, because the propaganda is working.
Right. And here, of course,
young people, stay focused. Get yourself a purpose. Get a cause. May I suggest to you that your cause is manhood, or if you're a woman, womanhood. That way you will have a bright cause every time you look in the mirror to brush your teeth in the morning or comb your hair or shave. Was I a man yesterday? Am I going to be a man today? Will I be a man tomorrow? Will I do the things that I need to do today so that I can rest easy tonight and not feel mildly embarrassed and shamed that I didn't do what I was supposed to do? Yes, there's white supremacy, but it's adversity. Our ancestors lived where there were lions, and because there were lions roaming around the Serengeti, they did not hide in hovels to escape the lions, they went out and conquered the lions. And now we have to save them because we made them an endangered species. Well, when you see the adversity that faces us now, just think of it as adversity, something to overcome, something to focus your cause upon. But remember, you have to do that intelligently. Don't get overwhelmed by the threat. It is something that can give you the opportunity to be a hero. Don't say to yourself, why should I even try? There's no daylight at the end of my tunnel. Think to yourself, it's my job to get the people I'm responsible for through that tunnel, to get them through the smoke and flames to the daylight at its end, even if I don't get there with them. I want to be a hero. So it's my job to slay the fire-breathing Gila monsters that are setting fire to everything in that tunnel and causing the smoke and flames. That's my job, to put it out or get rid of the cause. So you will sleep well at night. And one thing I want to say, and your dad has probably told you this, the difference between where you are, young man, and where I am seems to me like 2 years ago, because time passes so quickly. And please don't get yourself in a position of desperately wanting to see Jesus or something, because, oh, wow, is this all there is? And what did I do? And have I not accomplished anything? There's got to be something else. Do what you're supposed to do, and you won't have that feeling, because you can at least say, you know what? It was interesting. I had some hard times, but I overcame them. And I had some good times, and I was focused. So man up, promote manhood, protect womanhood. Protecting womanhood requires men, and promoting manhood so men can protect them requires that you promote manhood in yourself, your peers, and the next generation. Be observant, read everything you can, get your face out of that stupid idiot box, quit watching basketball, football, baseball, and pay attention to reality. Quit focusing on mess, because you'll fall in the trap. Donne pane circelsiae. Give them bread in circuses, and the mob won't care what their betters do when they get told what to do. And we get real plump because we got a lot to eat. We get bread, and we have lots of circuses known as entertainments and quasi-gladiatorial contests known as NBA, NFL, MB, Major League Baseball, and every other distraction we get into. So man up, act like a man, make it your duty, honor, and responsibility to carry that out. And at least you'll be able to sleep at night, and you will have some adventures, and you might get laid. You know, speaking of which,
Oh my God.
I'm deeply ashamed of this. Every statistic I've looked at is saying there are more boy virgins 25 and under than there are girl virgins. What's wrong with that picture?
Oh yeah, that's part of
it. Get no nookie, man. Come on.
Hey man, you know, we done went off subject a little bit, but but a lot of these guys are saying that these lovely ladies have raised their standards so high that you got to be damn near Superman just to take them on a date. And so
they haven't raised their standards so high. Let me give you a big secret, young men.
Yes, sir.
The beautiful ones are easier to talk to than the plain ones, because the beautiful ones actually look in the mirror, and because they're so close to, they notice the imperfections, they have esteem issues, they're self-conscious, and too many guys are afraid to talk to them except, hey, mama, hey, slick, you shall be fine. They don't want to hear that. Just talk with them. Next thing, there is an advantage that girls used to have that they still maintain over boys. While boys were playing cowboys and Indians or playing shoot 'em up vid games now, the girls are playing house. So they are much more familiar with the concept of domesticity. when they get to be teenagers and early 20s than you are, but they are not wiser. They're not more mature. They're just more experienced in the domestic game, but they're just as foolish. They're just as immature as you are in what's going on. Do not listen to them when they spout this nonsense, or they want you to be in touch with your feminine side. That is what they were taught to say. That's not what they want. They suffer from something called developmental bipolarity. There are those things that naturally resonate with women. When they get them, they feel good. And then there are those things that this dystopic nonsense has taught them to think they want. And when they get it, it leaves them cold. They get nothing out of it. They get weirded out because they are responding to stuff that they told was, you know, this is the meaning to respond to these things, but they like it. And see, remember, what you're looking at is something that is pulled by an engine where they want to be what you are. They want an XY chromosome set up rather than XX, but they really don't like that. You see, they like being women. And if you want to get laid, oh man, wow, you do something heroic, oh man, it's ready for you.
Okay.
Do the man thing and they like it. And the other thing is, don't worry. It'll weed the ones you don't need to be with out. If they're trying to diminish you, girl, I need to tear him down to size, honey. I hear you, honey. To get mad as book pieces. They don't even know what they're doing. You don't stay the hell away from that. Run. Don't put your in it. You don't need it. Find somewhere else. And rule one, do not sleep with any woman that you got to put a paper bag over her head. Do not sleep with any woman that you would not be willing to be caught walking down Main Street at high noon with everybody you know watching.
Okay, Judge, we need to get
man up, buck up, do what you have to do, become a magician with those books, get in them so you can move up. We need people who are versed in science, technology, engineering, math, and management so that we can have something new, so we can have our own .com revolution, because all that old stuff is glutted. It's got many tiers to it, and then there are those with the very deep pockets that can afford to operate at a loss, unlike you, for a long time until they build up a market. So think smart, think wise, and final caveat, nothing comes easy. I don't care what it is, if it's a hustle, if it's straight up, if it's legit, you have to work at it.
Yes, Your Honor. Thank you so much. Hey, let's get hashtag Judge Joe Brown going on. Everybody in here, hashtag Judge Joe Brown.
Now, let me say this. You can get me on Twitter at Judge Joe Brown TV, and they refuse to give me a blue check, and I don't want one. And they keep shadow blocking me. I had somebody audit, and I had 240-some thousand followers. Actual went through it. When he stopped, and Twitter said I had 43,800, and then they knocked it off. And then since the Kwame thing, I picked up almost 5,000 followers. So they'll knock that off soon enough. You see, don't believe everything you hear. Don't get your information from mainstream media. Research. And if you get deep enough into Googling, if there's something that you want to find out, there are research papers that are published for peer review. Go to those and see what you get out of them. And if you don't understand them, that's a homework assignment. Find out what they're talking about. You can do that when you're talking about COVID-19. You can do that when you're talking about man and woman relationships. Not on page 3, but on page 1,844 on Google, where you get down there to the serious stuff.
All right, you guys, you heard the Honorable Judge Joe Brown. Follow him on Twitter at Judge Joe Brown TV. Is that correct,
Okay,
Your Honor?
two more things.
Yes, Your Honor. Wait,
I'm launching a new barbecue sauce.
the
Judge Joe
barbecue
Brown
stuff.
Barbecue. It is some good stuff. And you're in LA. Go to 79th in Western.
Okay.
On the corner is D's Original Takeout Grill. It doesn't even say barbecue. That's the best barbecue in Los Angeles, and they use the product. It's going to be seasoning, sauces. We have regular, OG, and hot. And we have chicken links that are done by the only USDA licensed black operation in the whole state of California. We will be having Beyond Meat for links and stuff. We'll show you how to do greens with it, coleslaw, beans, chicken, beef ribs, spare ribs, brisket, shoulder, you name it, we can do it. Steaks. We will have a line of cookers and stuff like that that I won't get into because some of the ideas we're trying to get patented. So it will be launched. It's not an active website, but if you go to jjbbbq.com in a few weeks, you'll find it. It's supposed to be at Kroger, Walmart, and Anderton's, and that's Judge Joe Brown Barbecue, jjbbbq.com, and that'll be up and running in a few weeks.
All right. What up? Anything else you got, Your Honor?
You can also get me on Fridays. I do a thing, the Judge Joe Brown radio show or blog, and we syndicate it all over the world, and you can get it on iHeartRadio and stuff the following week after it's edited. You can call in to 929-477-1167 between 4 and 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time every Friday. Valerie Denise is the host. She's a nice young sister working on a master's degree. And we have an eclectic crew. And after we formally finish the first 2 hours, we can't get any more call-ins, but if we're on the line, it'll be a free-for-all. Hang on to your hats. And I believe Kwame is supposed to be there this Friday.
Oh yeah, Kwame has been lighting up the internet lately. He is getting it in there, man. He has got.
By the way, he is a role model.
Yes,
He's
sir.
an NBA player, but he's a single dad, and he's taking care of his children. And he didn't buy into the mindless automaton, follow the propaganda. He's into man up. And that's why he got a lot of negative flack. So somebody put the two of us together. We talked for 2 or 3 hours at the beginning of the week, last week, and he invited me on his show. So he's been doing the man up thing. He's a good young brother.
I like what he's saying. You guys made world star hip hop, so I'm sure your Twitter following is going to explode in the next few days. So
now let me tell you another thing on the scene. You know the Brain Trust, Black Brain Trust. We got one. We have some progressive Black PhDs who are physicists, scientists, mathematicians, that kind of deep brain trust. And they want to start on a man up thing and start talking to the Black youth to say, you don't have to be a thug. You can be somebody that's mental, still be a straight up and down man. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, look, you guys, I appreciate it. Look, I've learned a lot, and you know, my people always give me a hard time about interrupting some of my clients, interrupting people here. But you guys see, I was quiet as a church mouse. This is the respect and reverence that you have for a man of this caliber. We need.
And your daddy was a great man. I knew him from UCLA Law School. Yeah, he is.
Yeah, you know? He still. Yeah, he
was a righteous brother.
Yeah, and he knows
you ought to get him to tell you some of the stories too.
He did, but I don't want to really repeat all that on YouTube right now. They've already given me a strike. So, but he had wonderful things to say about you. And
for the Black lawyers, him too.
Yes,
we need to get some kind of action going where we can get Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, Instagram declared public utilities. A clue. When they took Trump in about 3 years ago because he was blocking people that were bad mouthing him on Twitter.
Right.
The federal court in question ruled that it was a public forum and he could not infringe upon their First Amendment rights to engage in political commentary. That is the same logic that resulted in private utility companies 125 years ago being declared to be public utilities, because due to the licensing that they have from the public to do the kind of business they do, they have to be responsive to the public interest, and they cannot use it for the unilateral suppression of free speech to push a propagandistic position that they have. We need to set them up and go for it.
Well, I'm licensed in the Supreme Court of the United States, Your Honor. I'll be more than happy to help spearhead that and get involved.
You just got recruited, son. Way to
yes,
go.
Your Honor. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure and an honor having you here. I thank you so much. I'm humbly appreciative. And, you know, anytime you want to come back, come on back. And I'm going to get myself some of that barbecue sauce. I'm going to put an order in as soon as that website comes up.
And by the way, I'm going to invite you on our show, too. My show.
Yes, Your Honor. All right. Anytime. I love to come. Thank you so much. That. Yes, Your Honor. It's been my pleasure. Thank you. Hey, you guys, before we leave, hit hashtag Judge Joe Brown. And remember, you can find Judge Joe Brown at Judge Joe Brown TV on Twitter. All right. So go ahead and make sure you get those followers up. Make sure when you see Joe Brown, make sure you say good things. I appreciate this. We need more elders like Judge Brown to speak up. We don't necessarily have them in the Black community. And many of you guys, you don't have father figures. You know, the only father figures you saw were people like Judge Joe Brown on television. It's good to get to know him so you can basically say, yeah, he grew up in LA. He grew up in the hood. He managed to get through college. He got through law school. He ended up going from California way out to Tennessee. He's dealt with racism. He's dealt with bigotry. And what did he tell you guys? It's not an impenetrable block. It's merely an obstacle, just like that lion analogy that he used. Africans didn't run and hide from the lions. They conquered the lions to the point the lions are afraid to come outside. That's how we have to begin to look at things. It's about perspective. What I heard in this past hour and a half is a man who is a victor and not a victim. He is a man who saw what was out there and he took charge. I'm sure his martial arts training has helped that, but more importantly, it's the man who he is. And we need to basically hold men like this up, in masculine, strong Black men who are fathers, father figures, who are educated men, and also my frat brother, Alpha Phi Alpha, light of the world. But aside from that, he's a Black man, and I appreciate having him here. Thank you so thank you so much, Your Honor. It's been my pleasure. And again, I look forward to speaking with you anytime you want me. And I look forward to working on that committee, and I can recruit a lot of young lawyers myself to help out with that. Anything else? Yes, Your Honor, I will do that. Thank you so much. All right, it's a pleasure. As I always said this time, are you out of here? And hey, he said it, so we out.
Let's see.